bird calling.
Oh, well.
Realize, like, you're
Pretty
able to
embarrassing.
amplify that.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome back. We're going to get started again with Representative Kimball. I think we're on section 7.
We were on page 7.
On page 7, section 5.
Oh, actually, we were on page 9. We were well into DOL and the
We're on page,
classified.
we agreed we would go to section 6.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
Page 11.
Incarcerated, page 11.
So the floor is yours. Representative Kimball, you had to be here.
My pleasure. Thank you. This next section was brought to us by the Corrections Committee, and it has 2 different, really, programs. So I'm getting up to speed.
Oh, Sarah Coffey spoke to me about this.
Yes. Page 11. Boy, okay, excellent. All right. So this is an allocation of $420,000. The first part is to go to fund $270,000 for the transition development, including equipment and mobile labs in 1 or more sites within the Department of Corrections. So these are really to be a way to get incarcerated individuals better equipped to take on jobs once they graduate or once they leave incarceration. The 270, we're talking about upgrading the equipment in some of the facilities is really not very helpful in terms of providing them with real on-the-job training experience or real workforce training experience. $100,000 in training support to pay for some of those folks to come in, and $50,000 for curriculum development. It really was the emphasis of the Corrections Department on this. So we did not take testimony ourselves on it, but relied on their good work to do it. So,
On corrections or on house institutions?
well, Corrections and Institutions and Committee. Yep. Yeah. The other part is $300,000, and that's for originally named in here as Vermont Works for Women, but it is not named in this particular program as consistent with our naming convention in the House for not including the sub-grantee. But that's for the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility and provide some expanded job readiness programs and reentry programs.
Sorry, is that in the money piece up here at the 100,000 and the 50?
No, it's below that. There's a separate section down below. So there's 420 with a 270, 150.
Right.
And then there's a section below, which was the $300,000.
Okay, so that was originally for Vermont Works for Women?
Yep. And that's for a 3-year program for a community-based pilot reentry program at a Chittenden County Correctional Facility. So the Department of Corrections will probably be the best to provide you with some feedback on that, and Vermont Works for Women.
Okay, I understand that we need to hear from them. I guess I have a question. Again, it's to the overlap. One's address educational and vocational enhancement needs, and the other is re-entry.
Right.
It seems like there is
Different. There is. It's different populations.
okay.
So $300,000 is really just for the women's correctional facility. Okay. And the $420,000 is for the other facilities which are servicing that. Yeah.
So just to give an overview, well, again, maybe it's for the Corrections Committee. We hear a lot about how we're not doing nearly enough for the incarcerated population and getting them back into the workforce. Is there anything else going on in this bill or elsewhere that you know to do workforce development for these populations?
There's not anything in this bill specifically. We did talk with a number of folks that are the training providers, Creative Workforce Solutions, Vocational Rehab, and working with those people that had been previously incarcerated and what they're doing for them and opening doors and providing access to training. So we originally had a broader scope with justice centers involved in this bill, and we took that out because it wasn't really germane. They had a separate set of activities, so we didn't include it in this.
So I don't know, Senator Ron, if you know much about this, but it seems that one of the big problems has been, once again, housing.
Yep.
Some of the furlough programs require that you demonstrate that you have housing in order to get out. And some people are just, for reasons not related to their crimes, they're stuck.
Yep.
You talk about that, or I should talk to corrections.
We did not talk about the housing element. We're on section 8 now on page 14, is that right? Or 7 and 8, which are just related. And this, again, at the request of the corrections committee, corrections institutions, is to charge the Secretary of Human Services, but also working with Commissioner of Corrections and Human Resources Department to do a study. How can we better attract and retain employees in the corrections system by doing a multi-state study, compare what the wages are, what the benefits are, work conditions, and getting back to the department as terms of what could be done differently. So there's no money appropriated with this, but it is a study. We thought of this as being something we should be doing in every department anyway, but there's a particular stress point with the Department of Corrections with the officers working there. High level of turnover, their work conditions over the past, through the pandemic, so they're working 16-hour days on occasion. So it's important that they take a look at this because there's more immediacy there.
I have to just throw in an anecdote here. I'm glad you're doing this, but I don't know why, but because of the Academy Awards, I wound up streaming the movie Attica.
Oh,
Highly recommended. Doesn't portray correctional officers in a very good light. But I was there and this is now.
yeah. We have a lot of very qualified. We talked to Department of Corrections about what the educational requirements are for corrections officers, and it's a high school diploma.
Right.
And they do provide some training beyond that, but it's tough work.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
I can't help but point out, Allison's not here, but on DevOps, we got a bill last year that sought to remedy some situation in the women's prison and address it through some consultant recommendations. The first two things they had in the bill that we had to strike out right away were polygraph testing and drug testing for corrections workers, and they had not talked to corrections workers. So it was an incredibly contradictory bill to this, I think, because you had corrections officers saying we have a supervisor who's a problem, and instead they focused on drug testing and polygraph testing, which is completely debunked as a form of lie detection. So I would just say we should be really clear in all ways about what we're doing to try.
There's a uniformity of acceptance of that. We certainly use polygraph testing to screen law enforcement officers today and have for many, many years with significant success.
I'm not sure what that had to do with being a corrections officer.
I don't know. So the next section is section 9, I believe.
Correct.
Okay, and that's on recruitment and retention initiatives. This was inserted by Appropriations Committee, and because over the past couple of years, we've stood up significant numbers of either incentives to stay on the job or incentives to get training or loan repayment. They wanted a report to say, how are these working? What's the actual results of the different programs? So that's what section 9 is about. How effective the appropriations identified were in addressing issues related to employment, recruitment, and retention, and identify any ongoing or remaining employee recruitment and retention challenges the recipients have. So it lists the different organizations or departments that have been targeted for those retention payments that were made in previous bills.
Is, I don't know if it's exhaustive or not, but it seems like you've been doing some of these programs further back from last year. Is there, and you guys are probably more expert in this than we are. Are there other things that touch upon this that come from previous acts that we should be reviewing as well?
You're right in that it's, I don't know that it's exhaustive either. There are probably ones that we have done that are not included in this bill, so it may be worth taking a look at that.
Yeah, at least to see if they've had any reports done.
Yeah.
I don't want to duplicate the report.
Yeah.
And I guess within employee recruitment and retention, I don't know if this goes back to your original remarks about COVID interfering, but we seem to have set up a bunch of different smaller programs like for seniors, for disability, that's my recollection. A couple of years ago, we had a bunch of these smaller programs set up, and I don't know if they ever got started but that may be something. It is recruitment and retention. That's
Yeah.
The silos we put in the bill that we passed a couple of years ago. They had nice names to them too.
Yeah. Right. So the next section, for instance, deals with that. Is one is returnship programs that we set up. Yeah. And that was for folks to re-enter the workforce after a period of not being employed or taking care of kids. Yeah.
Well, do you know if that was talked about here or we already have a report on that?
We don't have a report on it. And they didn't ask for the report on it, but it was, I can't remember the amount of money we appropriated into that. But it was, we were looking at how do we get some of the folks that are not currently in the workforce? How do we get them back in? Was the returnship the right program? We don't know.
Well, that's why I've always had some skepticism about all these different pots and targeted, as opposed to having an office of returnship and let them have the flexibility to you could put priorities within that, but to have this pot of money just dedicated for this and this pot of money just dedicated for that. So now that we're trying to do a review of some of these things, we'll just look and see if there's maybe other ones to add.
Well, that's an excellent segue into the next section, actually.
Okay.
Because we have been working with the Department of Labor on the next section, which is section 10 is repealing existing chapters and statute, which was internship and returnship.
Oh, okay.
And then the next section is to then put in place new wording in statute about the work-based learning and training program. So there was some language under the internship that was outdated and not very flexible in terms of what internships meant. So in this language, it's really talking about accepting a paid experimentation in a job that leads to a permanent position. So it's about working towards that job. Where in the previous iteration, the current wording in the statute is not necessarily linked that way. And it has an age limit in internships. So we looked at, does this make it simpler by combining returnships and internships in one section of legislation? We think it does. Administered by the Department of Labor. See the eligibility on the bottom of the page.
This internship thing, does this impact the thing we did in last year's bill? I think it was last year's. On apprenticeships?
No. We put money in apprenticeships last year, $2 million and $1 million carry forward because it wasn't all spent. Originally, apprenticeships, when we looked at the wording that was provided to us, apprenticeships was included in it, but we took that out. So the Department of Labor is looking at revising the apprenticeship statute. It's in a different section of statute. I think it's chapter 24, not this chapter. to 24, 21. Any of it? 24, 21? Okay, it's one of the 20s in the internship program, and that is going to be revised next year. So we didn't touch apprenticeships. There was a question about if we repeal that section, would that then make those grants null and void? I mean, we had that question. Like, we knew from the Department of Labor when the $2 million was appropriated last year, they wouldn't be able to put it all out. And starting on March 8th, they now have a full-time apprenticeship coordinator who is Jay Ramsey, who came over from the Agency of Education. So that's going to stand up their volume, increase their ability to place apprenticeships. Part of it is also to train the employers as to how to accept apprenticeships and also internships. There's included in the next section of this is a $1.5 million. The internship has been in the budget, base budget of $500,000. So it's an increase of $1 million into the budget. So our appropriations committee took it out of base budget and put it into one-time funds. They did that in order to make some of the dollars balance and work as to what was available.
So, but the apprenticeship monies and our vision for that is still going forward at a slower pace, and we're not necessarily changing that commitment.
So it's not changing it. No. And I think the governor's request is to carry that forward into 2023. Yeah.
That was there was some carry forward, 2 million was added. So we had, when we left here, we had $3 million and that's all that was carried forward. Well, I mean, some of it's been spent.
Yeah, so there's a $2 million appropriation for 2022 and $1 million of that is left.
Was the carry forward going into 2022 or not?
I don't think
Or
so.
it's brand new? Okay, so 1 million is going to be carried forward, no new money? for
No new money, no. So this $1.5 million does cover the full budget for the Department of Labor for the internships and returnships.
Is the $1.5 million, is any of it, or is most of it going to actually pay for the internships?
Yeah, so there's administrative work and there's also a balance of grants. So I can get back to you on how that breaks down, but I don't have the figures right now.
Okay.
And the Department of Labor, Sarah Bucks will be able to answer those specific questions. Yeah. I'm sorry, the chair isn't here for section 13, the secondary student industry recognized credential project.
Do you want to pass over?
I'll just give you a high overview of what it is. So we've heard a lot of testimony from directors of career and technical education centers that some of their students who wanted to take a course that was offered through the adults career and technical education programs could not, because there was not funding available to them, because it didn't count as dual enrollment, which we fund, and there weren't available funds to pay for that, because it's offered in the adult technical education, and to receive grants for that, then you have to be a graduate of high school. So what we looked at is there was some compelling testimony that those courses would be very beneficial for those students. So we created a pot of money. This is a $100,000 experiment for grants to be run through. First is the school system that has to say, okay, this, what you're asking for is along your line of study, your career path, your student education pathway. And so it doesn't go against that. Second, there's no funding available, or the school may have funding available that it can apply towards it. If they don't, then they'd submit an application to the Department of Labor with this pool of money. The Department of Labor would share that application with the Department of Education. If there was no funding from the Agency of Education, it would come out of this pot of money, this for the $100,000. And these courses range anywhere from, I think some of them were about $1,000, $600,000. So they could be more than that. So that's the intent, is to provide these individuals that are at the high school level with access to these courses taught at the adult career and technical education level.
Is it just for CTE students?
That's where Mike would have the answer to this, because it's for a student or Vermont resident attending a Vermont public school or an independent secondary school that's eligible for public financing. And they have to be a senior. So it doesn't, in the eligibility, require that they are enrolled in the CTE. The intent is to provide that for that CTE student.
So we'll just make a note of that.
Yeah.
Explore that further.
One of the things with CTE programs, if it's welding, for instance, maybe there's 16 spots that are offered during the day. The student comes in, wants to go to welding, no spots available. There could be a welding spot open in the adult section. The student can't take the course. So it's
Because they can't afford it, or there's a problem?
because it's offered through the adult career and technical education program.
Hard right now, provided. That doesn't sound like it has a lot of flexibility to it, but
It seemed to us when we were just talking about this, well, why can't they take an adult program? Well,
if there's an opening,
right.
seems like it's a win-win situation. I don't know.
There is a limitation on page 23 to limit it so no center receives more than $20,000.
I see that.
In our conversations, the Rutland staffer, they said, "Oh yeah, we could spend $100,000 on this." Like, oh, hang on, I think it was 110,000. They identified their needs. So we want a pilot project to be throughout the state, not just one center.
You don't have anybody from Rutland, I'm just gonna be.
Section 14 is the Vermont Trade Scholarship Program. This reflects what the governor requested to provide scholarships for students that want to focus on the trades. So to be enrolled in an industry recognized training and certification program that leads to initial employment, career advancement, building, mechanical, industrial, or medical trade. And we added clean energy, energy efficiency, weatherization, or clean transportation. We wanted there to be a nexus with some of our environmental goals for the state. So we included that in there.
What's a medical trade?
A medical trade could be, we had a bunch of discussion around there, whether it's either LNAs or some other programs. It could be phlebotomists, for instance, that are offered today. Yeah, so loosely defined.
What about broadband?
Does that qualify for mechanical? That's a good question. I don't think we answered that question specifically.
I know we need a lot of people in that field, for sure.
Yeah, I think Christine Alquist told us 2 weeks ago they needed 300 technicians to work in the field. Okay, so this establishes a pot of money of $3 million administered by VSAC. VSAC really likes this program, and they're willing and able to administer it. We talked about if there was a cap that you want to put on some of the programs. And they said they didn't want it because looking at the expense of some of the programs, some like I think Yestermorrow is a $9,000 program to get into the building trades. There's a lineman program that's $20,000 that's taught, I believe, in North Carolina. So they look at this as another source of funding to what they already pulled out, different pools of funding. We're on page 25.
Sorry, I apologize for having to say that. Great.
So,
Great.
so is this as simple as VSAC gets this money and somebody has a trade program or school where they're taking courses and just write them a grant, or they write the school or the program a check?
Yes, so in terms of how VSAC operates, I know they generally pay the school directly. So the application would be made to VSAC. VSAC has the advancement grants that we have made available to them and other sources of funds too. So in our conversations with Marilyn Cargill, what she was discussing was this ability to pull from different pools of financing to make it so the student could go, whether it's to cover their other expenses involved with attending the course. There might be some grant monies for that, so the wraparound services, and to be able to go. So they would be the ones administering those funds. Yeah, and so they write a check right to the school. Hang on, I just want to check one thing in there. Yes. They have to agree to work in their profession in Vermont for a minimum of 1 year following licensure or certification completed for each year of scholarship awarded. So again, it's a forgivable loan incentive program. They've administered this for nursing programs with great success. Yeah, that forgivable loan program. And Marilyn can talk about that, but over I'm not sure how many years, I think 80% of the people that have taken out these forgivable loans have lived up to that residency and work requirement.
80%?
Yeah, it's very high. And the remaining, the 20%, and that could be wrong on the specific numbers, have been repaying their loan without a high default rate. So it's achieving the goal that was established.
That's great.
And so I definitely think we need to ask the question of the duplication again, because
Yep.
if you get a scholarship for a medical trade and you get a scholarship for nursing, is there no triage there?
No pun intended. Good. The next is the Vermont Trades Loan Reimbursement Program.
Sorry, and where's the month, what's the money for the forgivable loan?
3 million.
For mine.
Oh, is that in,
That is on
I see at the bottom of page.
page 25. Yeah.
Got
And you'll note throughout the bill, there's different places where the appropriation sits, and that was a construct of 3 different drafters working on the bill. So it's
We had the same problem.
okay. All right. The next is the Vermont Trades Loan Reimbursement Program, which is again responding to the governor's request, and this provides a $5,000 per year loan repayment for every year they're working in the trade. And the same trades that are funded by the forgivable loan program above. And for as long as they're working at least 30 hours per week in that field before they apply for it. We had a long discussion about this. Well, what if somebody is
Wait a second, just so don't get lost. Is this the criteria for the forgivable nature of the previous section?
no,
This is section 16,
This is a whole
right, with
nother-
CTE.
This is a whole nother program?
yes, this is a $500,000 program, section 15.
Okay.
The $3 million program in section 14 above it does have in the forgivable, let's see, it's item number 4B4 on page 25. This is agree to work in a profession for a minimum of 1 year following licensure.
Right.
Yeah. And we didn't put more parameters around that for VSAC to administer it because they know how to administer. So it's just, you guys do it.
But isn't that similar to what's in section 15? It's also, it's a Vermont trades.
One is the scholarship or forgivable loan. This is the reimbursement program for the loans that they have that are outstanding.
Other ones.
Oh, these
Other
are the
loans.
other ones. Okay.
These are other loans. These are not, right, I'm sorry.
These are-
Loan repayment.
So essentially, we're talking about mortgages and second mortgages.
No, no, only student loans.
No, just kidding.
Yeah.
No, but I'm just saying that you get scholarships to get into the, up to $5,000.
There's no limit on the scholarships because of the cost of the programs that we had discussed with various folks. So I have it here.
So if you get a scholarship
Yep.
There's a good chance you still might have to take out a loan for the balance of your payments, and this is forgiving that.
No, the idea was to provide loan repayment for those that have entered into the trades. So it's a previous existing loan.
So if they, for undergraduate or for,
And it may be for, it probably would be for people who didn't get a scholarship. Are the scholarships envisioned as being full scholarships?
Yes, and a mix of different pots of money available to those students.
right,
All
depending on
just
their
based on need. Yep.
based on needs, right?
So some of the programs that wrote down that what we had heard, Yes Tomorrow, the building program was $9,000. Resource, some of their programs are $5,200. Vermont Woodworks is $8,400. And Alignment School is $20,000.
Alignment school, is that like body alignment?
Alignment, we're working on alignment, power lines, and Yeah.
Line,
So you're
right.
gonna face the same question that we face, when you do our bill, you're gonna face a similar question here that I'm about to ask. Is this looking back to people who are not necessarily helping them, even though they're secure in their repayment ability or continuing in the trades, or we?
I know what you're asking, yeah, so it's-
So this is
We had a-
perspective, this is
No,
perspective.
no.
Oh, sorry.
He's saying that section 15 is for people who have loans, who have already entered into education in the trades, or may even be working in the trades. And now we're gonna start putting $500,000 towards helping them repay their loans just because they're in the trades. I don't know if there's any
So they have to
means
live.
testing or anything like that.
right, so
Right. They have
it's
to
really an incentive program to
stay.
get more people to work in the trades or stay in the trades. So the example that we often talked about is, what if somebody has a degree in Greek mythology and then they decide they want to be a carpenter? Well, that's great. Are you going to forgive or pay for forgiveness of part of a loan that's not related to their new profession? So we had a discussion about that. Does that really make sense? I mean, they're not going to school for it, so why are you forgiving that? And I think one of the comments offered was, if it gets you the desired result, do you really care?
So what is the desired, I know the desired result is to get them to stay in the trades, but what's the requirement here? How long that?
Yes, so it's to get more people to work in the trades.
Or you get for every year you work.
For every year you work,
it's
and it's not retroactive, so you've been a carpenter with a Greek mythology degree for 10 years. Does it go back the full 10 years and you get 50 grand? No, it starts going forward. So July 1st, you have to work for a full year, you apply for the loan, it gives you a year of repayment.
So whatever your current debt is, you're eligible.
Yes.
You're not eligible for past debt. So I think the word you were looking for, Michael, was perspective versus prospective.
You're eligible for past debt, but not for past, you don't get credit for
Payments.
past work.
Right.
Right, it's only going forward
It's
as
o-
long you're in that trade.
And it is conceivable that somebody with that Greek mythology degree would come back into adult CTE or wherever to get, or go into Vermont woodworking and say, I can't afford the $8,400 program cost.
Yeah.
Get a scholarship, graduate, go work, and also get a loan repayment.
Then they could theoretically still get their student debt for their Greek mythology
So
degree
it's a
paid.
perennial problem, so the block that we have, but for,
But for, right,
well,
Yeah.
these people may be totally happy in their job, and now they're gonna get.
If they're totally happy in their job, they're probably not gonna go to the effort of doing this.
so my brother was a
Always
math
rose
major.
colored glasses.
My brother was a math major at Middlebury College, and he is a carpenter in North Carolina. So he's probably a good example of someone that has this well, it's applicable, I suppose, in some carpentry, but it's not directly related to what they're doing now in the field.
Yeah, that I have less questions on. I'm not saying problems, but questions. I mean, I'm just more concerned about giving $5,000 out a year to somebody who's perfectly content being in the trades.
Yeah.
And you're not really accomplishing any retention I mean, you can say the same thing about a relocated worker. I mean, you do.
And he will, and he will.
But we're not discussing that today.
Right.
That's not in this bill.
Okay, so we will noodle on this. I'll put back my rose-colored glasses. Okay,
Okay,
so we're now on section 16.
section 16 is the CTE Construction Rehabilitation Experiential Learning Program, right?
Jeez, what am I?
So this basically takes $15 million from the excess in the education fund and provides a revolving loan fund or revolving fund for career and technical education building trades programs to purchase and rehabilitate existing properties.
Right.
So it's to expand the experiential and educational opportunities for high school and adult CTE students to work directly on construction projects, to build community partnerships among CTE centers, housing organizations, government, and private business, to beautify communities and rehabilitate buildings that are underperforming assets. We had blighted in there, but really put underperforming instead. To expand housing access to Vermonters and communities throughout the state, and to improve property values while teaching high school and adult student trade skills. It also provides the opportunity that if a student is working on a project during the school year, it gives them academic credit for it. They don't get paid during the school year if they have adult construction. But during the summer, if they're working, it says for a competitive wage. It pays them a competitive wage if they still continue on that over the summer. So it provides for the payment then. There's, I think, 15 building trades programs in the CTE centers throughout the state. Many of them have built houses one every 2 years. There's whole neighborhoods that have been built by CTE centers. Tomorrow is Thursday. We're going to St. Albans to look at the CTE center there and the building trades program. And we talked to them. They have 80 students enrolled in their building trades program in St. Albans. Huge. Where another center up in Canaan, I think, has 12. So it really depends all over the place. Part of the issue is time on task. And what you can do with a building trade program inside of a building is more time on task. You can build it right in there and then transport that somewhere else. You don't lose anything transporting the student to the job site. So that's a consideration in this. So once we originally were just thinking it's only existing properties, we want them to focus on that. We got pushback and input from the CTEs, but what about if we build new stuff?
Right.
And CTE centers that teaches all those trades, is that permissible? It's like, yeah, it's permissible, not the agenda. But so we talked with the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, who is charged with administering this fund. We talked with the building trades programs. We talked to the Department of Housing inside the administration, and they're all pretty revved up about this idea, this $15 million and revolving. So it's not just a one-time appropriation. So when they buy the property, renovate it, sell it, or they build new, sell it, and that fund goes back into the revolving fund, those proceeds do.
Yeah. So this would be great in Springfield. This would be great in Rutland, where they have the CT centers with these programs. It would be great in St. J. I mean, it would be great around the state, actually. And particularly because we've in two different places passed, both in the Springfield Charter and in our municipal changes, the opportunities for towns through ordinances to address blight.
Right.
So actually, this ties in to a lot of the other work we're doing.
So who's, is someone buying land in this?
Yes, that's one of the authorized uses.
Yeah.
So
So you don't, I mean, you don't necessarily need to buy the land if you're constructing the house at the CTE center, but if you're
Or renovating.
or on a building site off campus, you do.
right.
So the CTE gonna get involved in ownership of land?
It could be them or one of their partners.
Or VHCB.
So it could be, it could be Rural Edge, it could be Lake Champlain Housing. So it could be any of those partners that they're involved with. And the source of funds could be coming from this particular fund. Really, it's going to be a match of different funding. Don't anticipate this being 100% funding, but there are other sources of funding that could do it.
And VHCB, you said, is tasked, you're funneling the money through them,
Yes.
so they could also own, they're able to own land.
Yeah.
So your VHCB will give, whether, I mean, I would guess VHB or some other nonprofit will get involved in the real estate end of this. But in terms of construction, the money will be fronted from this fund
Yep.
to the CTE for materials. There's no labor costs really. Well, I mean.
You've got the instruction, yeah.
You can have some, I mean, you're gonna have some subs probably and
Yes.
allocate some instruction costs, but, and then when the house or property is sold, all of those proceeds go back into
Right.
that fund.
Yeah.
It's a non-interest,
Right, zero interest loan.
zero interest loan.
There's somewhere in all of this, this particular provision interests me, but throughout all, are there any kind of look back or audit or performance requirements to determine whether these programs after X period of time are in fact working as intended? And of these, what's the return on investment, if any?
Yeah, it's a good question, Senator. I think there's two different pieces. One, it has to meet educational goals.
Sure.
And that's a whole different set of auditing that has to meet.
And performance audit is performance audit.
Right. And then VHCV in terms of reporting on the uses of funds. And so they can make those reports. So it's the intangibles or what does it do in the beautification or in the restoration of the building. But so we did not put in here a performance or an audit requirement in this particular language.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we should be thinking about.
So-
This, and also about what we've done.
Standard course for civil.
Standard course, standard.
He's a former auditor. What do you say?
know. Yeah.
So is this, when you started out, you said there was like 40-something million in this bill? Is that, is this 15 million part of that 40 million?
Yes, it is. Even though it comes out of the education
But
fund.
it's out of the education fund?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Charlie, did you talk about this at all with the, yes, I'm looking. I thought we had some, but it just disappeared. I'll find some. Did you talk about this at all with the corrections, in the corrections piece? Because one of the greatest things Vermont Works for Women did was when the women's prison was in Springfield, they had an incredible program where they taught the women construction, electric, plumbing, and general contractor skills. They built affordable houses, which we then assembled in Springfield. I can't remember how many were the result of it, but quite a few. And this is also a program that is well suited for corrections and building skills in corrections across the board. So did you have any conversation about how this, through adult CTE, this could also extend into corrections? We just have to see how it works.
No, we did talk with VHCD in particular, who wanted to see if we could include, say, Vermont Works for Women or other organizations. The limitation on this is these are education fund dollars. So in terms of the potential uses of, so the folks that we, within the House are very protective. They said, no, this has to be limited just to
And this is the excess money we have. This is the one-time money we have now.
Yes.
Right. Okay,
Right.
so this is one-time money. And yeah, okay. Well, in future, I think we need to think corrections too with this because it's.
Could Habitat for Humanity be involved in this, or is that also part by education?
Still the education. So it had, the first test has to be, are the students and the enrolled in CTE
No,
centers?
it raises all kinds of complications to farm it out, but I mean, could the students work on a Habitat for Humanity project? And
Well, they could be.
Well, if you think about the potential universe of partners
Yeah, there would be.
that is mentioned in here, it could be Habitat for Humanity. And even on page 30 of the bill, in terms of what you can do with the funds, and A, it's acquisition, design, permitting, construction, marketing, and other building related expenses. And then cost for labor, including student wages and for instructor compensation, as well as for summer other work. Some of it, when we were talking about, do you need to bring in subcontractors for work that the students aren't going to learn a whole lot about but needs to be done?
Right.
Or it's too dangerous. So if there is asbestos remediation, if there is water contamination or mold or that kind of stuff, you got to bring in outside contractors. The students will learn about it, but they probably won't be doing the work.
It's a very creative idea. It's, I've taken testimony like other states got it. And it seems like when you want to do hands-on experience.
No, this is
Yeah.
a great idea.
It's great money. We didn't talk to anybody outside of the state. We did talk with a number of the building trades programs, and they're all pretty excited about it. Essex has a great program that they've owned a chunk of land for years. The development project is not how a private developer would do it. Like they build a 100-yard section of street at a time. And the next year they do another 100-yard section of street. And it's all tied into the building that they're doing at the time. But they have been doing that for a while. So there's good examples around there.
Yeah, no, this is exciting. And actually it also could partner long-term with our missing building.
Yeah, it could be part of their housing.
It could absolutely be
right.
part of it.
I mean, I get nervous about one times. I mean, this is a good idea. Probably should be ongoing.
But revolving loan
It's
funds
revolving.
are great.
Revolving
concept.
loan, yeah.
It's revolving.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good piece of one time.
We also had a discussion about should this be limited to sustainably affordable housing projects.
Yeah, we've had those discussions. Too.
Yeah.
And within the realm of education, it was strongly advised by the people we were speaking to that, no, it's not limited to just that one particular thing. If the students are learning from, say, working on a commercial space, then they're going to learn a lot by doing that. And it improves the downtown area, great, super.
This is more about education than it is about providing a great number of houses.
Right.
Yeah.
Education and workforce.
Okay, Representative, we're going to take a break.
Okay,
We're another till 11:15. Could you come back then?
sounds good.
So it's not, are you pretty much, unless you have more to say about this.
I don't,
Okay, so we're going to
This
section
is-
17.
we're on page 31.
Yep. Oh my God, we're almost halfway through the bill.
And you said you're gone tomorrow, right?